Go. Hi, Darryl. How you doing?
How you doing, man?
And sorry, I fumbled a little bit here, but yeah, I just to give everyone a little background in case nobody knows that's watching right now is that I started promoting clubs like a few years ago. Very relatively new. I'm an artist, and I reached out to Darryl and also other people. Some people here in LA, some people in New York, and also just everyone through this pandemic. And I explained, my intentions of what I wanted to accomplish. And you seem the most excited and the most motivated to push this ahead. So I don't know what. Tell me about how when I approached you, like what were you thinking? What were you did that trigger something in you to say, hey, I need to get on board with this?
Well, interestingly, I had in '94 sent out a email from well, then it was Furnace Records, and what was funny was like this was something that we mostly mailed out, because there was no email then. Like we even said you can reach us on internet, and the internet was in caps, and it was just kind of funny, like thinking about what we were saying in '94 in relation to technology. But it was also clear that there had been a long it had been a long time coming, really. And so the idea of somebody else being focused on it, and I think the pandemic had done a lot to connect people to things that were more meaningful, I think. And so when you sent that, when I saw that, I was just like, of course I'm down. And I felt that what I could bring to the table was the idea that I've been in this scene since it started. So I have a perspective that many may not. And then coming from being a person of color, it was the idea that, like, I think I saw the entire spectrum through a different lens. And then on top of that, because I'm not, I do my own kind of experimental thing. I'm not competition to anybody. So because of that, then I'm kind of like Switzerland in it all. Like, I don't have any, like, I'm not trying to hawk my wares as far as the idea of like challenging new promoters or whatever. I just try to promote everybody. And then if they don't produce the kind of things that I'm into, then I just mostly stay quiet. I like, unless the person's a problem or something, I don't bother in negativity. It's just like, well, just because it might not be my thing doesn't mean that it's not worthy of existing or whatever. And so I think that all those things combined, I think, like, it was the right time, it was the right idea. And I
Well,
believe,
I
just very quickly,
yes.
my hackneyed attempt at '94, I felt like this was much more of a specific ask versus just telling somebody about a problem.
Well, although we both have, I mean, you have been in the scene a lot longer than I have and put on events a lot longer than I have. I think we share this common, like you mentioned, Switzerland thing where we're not huge players. We have events, but it's still influential. And I think that's important as well because it's not seen upon as, oh, well, that person is criticizing these other parties
Mm.
or the promoters or artists because their competition and they want to start drama. And I think that noise needs to go away and everyone needs to
Mm.
focus on the real problems that are happening. And I just want to get this, from the start, just off my chest here. I think, the elephant in the room, we're two males here, two cis males. I don't always assume about, anyone else, but I identify as a male, and I think we need to shut the fuck up and listen. Like, that is the thing. I think it's not just about pushing and advocating these things, but, and you spoke about the pandemic and people reevaluating. I think it's also about stopping and listening to other people, listening to someone who says they have been marginalized or have not been able to contribute to our scene, but also on, to, because the manifesto and the code of ethics like go on to different things. It's not only about the creativity in the scene, but it's also about having safe spaces. Uh, so it's about also listening to other people and listening to patrons and other DJs and artists and saying, okay, let me shut the fuck up and listen. And if they're telling me things that maybe I don't agree with at first or don't see, maybe there's another perspective, right? And maybe I need to self-evaluate and say, how am I doing this, and could I do it better? Can I can I just bow out of this gig and say, hey, what, this other person really enjoys or really is a really talented person and maybe needs this opportunity. Let me bow down a little bit and, let them have it, because I'm experienced and I can always get gigs, but maybe this time I can give it to that person. Or, if for other instances, if somebody's feeling uncomfortable with something you're doing, some party you're throwing, if you have some kind of graphic on your flyer, you got to listen and you have to hear what other people are saying. And if you don't agree, if you think that, oh well, this wasn't the intention, still listen and reflect and think, like, what are we doing? Not, that's not cool. I don't. Do you agree with that?
Well, firstly, I don't, as a black person, I don't necessarily take the idea that we all have to shut up. I just think that, and or have safe space. We need respectful space. Respectful space to me is safe space. Like, if you look at the idea of, I think the Trump phenomena exposed a lot of cracks in this scene and showed that, I've always been uncomfortable with the right wing part of this scene, period. End of sentence. And it's been coddled for a really long time. And no one said anything really about it. It's like, cool, it's funny. So to me, and I feel that, like, there is room for, there's room for all voices, because in a lot of ways, there's room for all voices. If people could, well, get over the drama. Most of what I see, because I don't engage in any of that stuff, most of the drama, think about, I don't have, just as an example, right? I don't have any right wing people in my immediate network. Why is it that all through the pandemic, I just saw threats, veiled threats, going back and forth with all these different people, and like, you don't mess with us, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, what? Why are all these veiled threats and like all the kind of, I'm upset or I'm mad, but you know who I'm talking about type thing like that? To me, that's what I deal with my high school students, and they're, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
And
Why throw
so
out all that and not go in specifically and say, hey, this is what's bothering me? Like,
well, right. In other words, but this is, look, that's a bigger problem than just what the industrial scene deals with. Like, just people in general aren't capable of addressing issues in any kind of real adult way. Just and a very quick example, somebody had posted online about in our scene had posted about getting a friend request from a person who had had a previous drug habit and so on and so forth. And, you know, oddly, before I jump in a thread, I read it. Like, you know, now if there are hundreds of them, I don't go through all that, but I certainly read to see what have people posted or commented already. Do I need to even add anything to this, or do it just hit like that? Like, I like what that person said, you know, that. And so as I was reading the thread, because there wasn't many people who responded, only maybe a dozen or so, it was clear to me that nobody had said the clear thing to the person. And then there was a person who said, and you know, as the student, as my students would say, I'll easily put people on blast. The people were saying, hey, you know, ignore it, just act like you didn't see it. I do that all the time. Nobody ever asks. I'm like, do you understand that you just posted publicly that like you like to lie to people and not tell them the truth? Like, and so I was the one who came into the thread and said, hey, you know what? If you tell the person that you care about them, but right now you're focused on you and you need to take care of your issues and you'd like to stay in touch, but then set clear boundaries as an adult. I was the only person who said, like, you know, you need to talk to this person and just tell them and set clear boundaries. You don't have to throw them out of your life. You don't have to do any of these other things. You just need to talk to the person. And it's,
Well,
I
that's
think
easier.
that's,
That's easier said than done because
but
sometimes,
no,
you know,
no. In other words, you can talk to people. It's the idea, will they respond? Now, they might not respond well. And I think that's why people are afraid to speak. But in other words, I don't think like, you know, as a person who's always been unmuted, I don't, there's no benefit to staying quiet. All I see is that that just creates it creates drama. It creates a situation where you're allowing the other person to create a narrative all of their own, because if you don't say anything, then that's all that does is let somebody keeps it in a nebulous area. You know, see what I'm saying?
well, let's go back to what I said about shut the fuck up. I don't mean about not expressing something you see that's not right, that needs corrected. But I just meant kind of listening to other external feedback from people, because I'll ask you this. I don't think everybody is evil. You know, I think even people who exhibit toxic shit, uh, do you think they do it on a subconscious level? Do they think they don't know what they're doing? Maybe because you know, I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in New York, and I have a lot of family that is somewhat conservative, and it doesn't add up because we have, you know, they care about people. They say they're religious, but then they support certain ideas that conflict that, right? So is
Mm-hmm.
it a subconscious thing? Do you think, you know, for instance, us both, you know, like, I mean, I like to think that I don't exhibit any toxicity, or I don't do things that hurt other people. But that the truth is, I've done something to hurt someone else, right? And I think shutting the fuck up means just kind of listening, and you know, in your mind you're like, well, I'm a good person, so I can't be hurting somebody else, right? So it takes me just listening and saying for the day and saying, wow, this person told me that they kind of got like a little upset of what I said or did. I'm gonna think about it. I don't have to admit, or I don't have to shame myself in saying I'm a terrible person. I need to be ostracized. I need to like go away. But maybe I should think about what I did and how it affected people, and say, you know, oh, maybe I should just communicate when the time is right and say I'm sorry, you know, and build on that, because I think and that's what I mean by shut the fuck up. And it's like,
Mhm.
if I don't have that, if you don't have that, if anyone that agrees to what we're doing, not just us,
Mhm.
doesn't abide by this, then it's really like pointless, because we always need to adapt. I mean, I made a post the other day about creating safe spaces, right? You can't
Mhm.
guarantee those safe spaces, because there's different challenges that happen every time, and it's going to be evolving. But it's important to, I think, to listen and see what's going on and adapt to it. Like, and even talk to the toxic people. It's, like, if somebody is really toxic and they're harassing or harming someone, I think that's a different story. But if it's something where you genuinely think these patrons or this DJ or whatever is doing something really fucked up, I think a discussion, not
Mhm.
necessarily a calling out, but a discussion of saying, maybe you should rethink of like what was going on, and maybe it's a different side of things, like a self evaluation. But
Sure.
that's kind of what I meant about shutting the fuck up. I didn't mean,
No,
hey.
no, I understood. I understood. I was just saying the idea that, like, and to be clear, when you said, like, two cisgendered males,
I
the two of
apologize
us don't.
if that's not right. I
That's
mean,
true. No,
okay,
in other words, I'm a cisgendered. In other words,
okay,
if you want to put me in these categories, I fall into cisgendered. But my point is the idea that, like, just because I come with testicles, does I've done more to promote and to mentor women than a whole bunch of females that are in the industry. So it's not necessarily the idea that, like, you know, um,
well, it's not an exemption for
that
either one of us. I mean, I feel
neither,
like,
neither, neither.
yeah,
Well, no, but in other words, like, I don't sit just because I've been around forever. Certainly, I've watched a lot of people show up, do less, and get more. So in other words, like, I don't fall just because I have testicles doesn't give me privilege. I mean, I certainly, because of my stances on things, the idea that I've always been very overt, um as an activist, as activist, as art, as activism as art, and the idea of activism as social engagement. So those two have always been connected, and that has always caused friction from the moment of me even naming my band Abstinence, for that matter. And so the
which by the way, it makes me think of another point I want to make, but finish.
Sure. So yeah, so the idea of privilege, and yeah, I think that what we could all benefit from is what I've been trying to push forever, which is the idea of it's incumbent upon those of us who have been around to help develop those who have not been, so, or who just showed up, or might not. In my estimation, the idea of even older people, that have never been able to find a voice, and to help them find a voice. So these are the kind of things that don't sit easy on the um on those that go back to early Consolidated. This isn't a fucking press conference. I want to hear some music. So there's always somebody that's going to say, like, dude, I just want to hear the beat. Some version of I only want to hear the beat. And you can tell that by a lot of the music that people go for. And, like, the kind of just a couple of angry samples and so on and so forth. And we're done. And the when I was talking to Genesis Peerage about this same issue, it was that crossover between dance industrial and, like, what I would consider roots industrial that caused this friction, because there was a lot of the first generation industrialists came out of punk rock. So we had a different perspective because we were coming out of punk rock. A lot of the later generations came out of the alternative scene. Now, the alternative scene has a lot of eclectic ideas, but then sits within a recognizable structure, which is why bands that never toured with guitar players, drummers, bass players, like a traditional setup in the late 80s, early 90s started touring with them. And the industry put it out as the idea like, this is what a full band looks like. So you have this split of people who are originally there for some kind of like other, because now alternative is just seen as a genre versus the idea, if you knew your history, when alternative music broke, alternative music meant an alternative to the mainstream. It literally meant that.
And then it became the mainstream.
And well, it didn't become the mainstream. It became absorbed. Parts of it became absorbed into the mainstream. So I don't confuse the idea of something becoming popular with the idea of it becoming mainstream. Like the genre itself didn't become mainstream, but just like as exampled in the Wax Trax documentary, once money started coming into the scene, everybody started throwing money at it. And then everybody said, well, hey, we can be hits here. Like in the beginning of the genre, none of us were thinking about the word hit or pop, anything, because there was no pop access. It wasn't until the industry started and like bands like Nine Inch Nails and Ministry and other like guitar driven type bands had really made more of a break in the industry, that was the thing that drove everybody to say, well, the industry pushed at that point, which was when I did my original kind of outburst at the scene or to the scene. That's when that was all being pushed in the early 90s. So then it's just like, well, everybody wanted to make like, either you want to sound like KMFDM or Ministry or Nine Inch Nails.
Do you think
those said again?
Do you think that was pop industrial? Do you think pop industrial exists, or is it coming today? Like, because I
don't think there's ever, as a first generation punk rocker, what fucking idea is it that anybody could think that there's pop anything in these genres? Like, I always remind people that even the biggest stars in our genre are nothing. My students in the South Bronx are 100% into mainstream culture, right? So when I show them videos of like, my culture or whatever, the number one thing that they talk about is the idea that like, mister, nobody cares about your music. Like, look, you only have a couple of hundred views or maybe a couple of thousand views. Like, who cares? Like if you don't have over 20,000, 30,000 views, they don't even see that as like even reputable, no more than like celebrity. I mean, most celebrities' dogs get more, most celebrities' pets get more attention than anybody in this scene.
Yeah, even Instagram influencers are. I mean, there are some bands that are able to make a living off of it, but not a. Let's say
how many?
They're not millionaires.
Name a band that all the artists live 100% on that income.
Well, I think live
well. In other words, you can be living in a hovel, but I'm talking about that like they make enough money that they could own a home. I'm not talking about a mansion. I'm just saying own a home or do something like, in other words, something that equates like a average salaried living. And that there's very few. Most of the people that I know that are considered celebrity artists, most of them have a day job when they get off tour. Most of them.
Skinny Puppy comes to mind, but I mean, each one of the members they do other things. Like, so I don't
No,
know if
true, but
solely
I was
based on
thinking,
that.
like, I mean, you could say that about Ministry or about any of these other bands. Most
Mhm.
of them have, most of the people outside of, like, with Al is the lead person.
But they're not the majority of the scene.
No,
Yeah.
but the majority of bands outside of bands of that size, who a next level down is making a solid living off of playing industrial music. I
Not
just don't. In other
many.
words, I don't see anybody. I don't see many artists that are making, you know, 50, $60,000 a year solid on their art every year, where they can bank on that. I
So
just,
we just have
I,
to accept it's our subculture. We do it for passion. Most of us do it for
right, but
passion.
that's my point about the idea of, like, if this is the case and it's a provable truism, then why are people thinking about celebrity? And then why do people, I mean, there was a sister, speaking of which, there was a sister who was talking about, she was doing it, trying to do a gig, and somebody was booking her and wanted her to change her name because they would fit better with the programming or something like that. And I was like, I just came into the thread. I was like, hey, if anybody asks you to change your name or any of that shit, you just say kindly, fuck you. You know what I mean?
You
Like,
know that sounds very very familiar, and that I mean not the name, but well maybe even the name, but I remember having a conversation with Chris Smack about changing my whole project to fit some kind of popularity contest that was going on, in the clubs in 2000. That was
mm-hmm.
when I was playing Byte, but that's a different story. I don't want to go into that,
No,
but
well, in other words, this isn't, look, this isn't about putting people on blast. Cause I think, just so we can frame the entire conversation, I think that, like, blunt, open conversation about the community does not mean that disrespect. And it doesn't have to, and it certainly doesn't in this idea. Um, but there are a lot of things that just need to be said in the scene that I feel like that, we're I used to pride myself of being part of the underground, because in the 70s, being part of the underground meant that you were paying attention to shit that, like, the people who were into ABBA weren't.
mhm.
Or pick a band. I just picked them because they're easy, and they're in the A's.
Yeah.
But, like, and at Tower Records, they used to be before abstinence. But, like, different conversation. So the
It's
idea,
great to start a band with the letter A because that's the first thing they see in the aisle probably.
yeah, it's just kind of funny that, yeah, that it happened that way. But point being is the idea that I think that by having real discussion, real dialogue about, like, what the hell's happening, um, all all the pressures from venues, all the pressures from promoters, all the pressures from people in the industry, and as I did it addressed in the code of ethics, is the idea of, like, all the pressures from, the people themselves, the patrons. I mean, we can't remove the patrons from this. In 2004, I had written a long thing that this was then about, the incident with Neville Wells and the New York scene and so on and so forth. I'm not going to bring up that drama. That brother's doing well now, and I'm glad that he was able to get his life together. Um, but point being is, everybody, all of a sudden, all these people were coming out then on LiveJournal. I think it was LiveJournal or the beginning of MySpace. But in any case, they were then saying a ton of stuff about him and blaming him for the scene. I said, "This not you. You can't blame Neville for the idea of drunk people coming up to the DJ booth always asking for the same shitty requests.
Mm. Yeah,
You
well,
can't. You can't blame them. You have to then blame the people, like, because if you're a DJ and you're trying to get people in the door, And then you're looking at this request list, and you're looking at the idea of and I see it all over period, where here you're looking at your what these people wrote down, and you're like, well, this is what the audience wants. Now they're also telling people, because it's in modern times, so then they're posting shit online about, like, I went to this show and blah 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 blah, they didn't do this or whatever, or I would have wanted blank. And then, like, if you're really doing your research, then you see the idea of the kind of bands that all these people like. So then it turns into a self-replicating vortex of, like, popularity. It's like, so, and even when people are booking things now, it's like, well, we're looking at how many views does your band have before we'll even think to book you.
Or paid likes.
Right. Or paid likes, which is, in my head, antithetical to, like, when I was an A&R director, in the idea that, like, the ultimate A&R thing then in the 80s and the 90s was the idea that I would walk into a venue mostly walk into a venue and see an artist where there was like fucking 15 people there, but they were amazing. Like, that's like gold. And I don't mean gold like, like, we're going to make a ton of money on this, because again, there's no money in the scene in my head. And so
well, those people that request those songs at the clubs, the tired old songs, who are those people? Those are the regulars, right? The elder people.
No. It's not elder people. There's the point, is the idea that it's across the spectrum. It's an age-old problem, so it's an age-old issue. So then, like, young people are asking for crap, old people are asking for crap is being asked for.
Well, period. Can we strive, or other promoters or DJs strive, to get new people in constantly that haven't heard a single artist or song, that they can say, hey, I want to hear that Covenant song. They're like, whoa, I like all the music that's being played tonight. It's brand new to me. I think, maybe we can all make that effort to get newer people in, and not necessarily the same type of person.
I don't know of any production team that's just trying to get in the same exact people they had in last week or last month or last year. I don't know anybody who's not trying to reach a new audience. It's just the idea of who comes in the door. So the who comes in the door is really based on the idea of, again, popularity, so on and so forth. It's all these other things. Look, the industrial scene has not been a scene really of experimentation for quite some time. So again, I can track that back to my arguments about it in the early 90s, for God's sakes. So it's not that this is a new problem. This is the idea. Everybody kind of ran in the beginning. The argument was, and I have it recorded, that Nine Inch Nails was going to be the opening of the genre to the mainstream. Now, at the time, I said that Nine Inch Nails, to me, wasn't really an industrial band. People argued. Trent later said,
he said he's not.
Well,
but I mean, there's influence. He said
that he wasn't, but in other words, like, he had divorced himself from the genre while not shitting on it. So I felt that, like, that proved exactly the point. The dude from, like, the person who's supposed to be the savior and bring all these people to the scene, all it did was mainstream the idea and give everybody ideas of, like, I can be a rock star one day. And it was the rock star factor. That's the same thing I saw happen in punk rock. Once the record labels came and started giving people real contracts, then all of a sudden it became like, now this is punk rock and this is this. but it became formulaic because as soon as you
It's like,
get
hey, you're into
this,
Rancid, you're a poser because they're signed to like this big label and they got a video on
well,
MTV,
I'm not
you
even,
know,
well,
like that
again,
era.
brother, like, I'm a first generation punk rocker. So Rancid didn't exist in that sphere.
That was my generation. Uh,
Rancid, Green Day, none of that stuff existed. With like those people were in grammar school when, or children or babies or something when I'm talking about the things I'm talking about. So
yeah,
I'm just
that
saying,
was my generation. Was hey, that group signed or they're opening for No Doubt, so they sold out. You know, I
well,
remember in New
they didn't
York.
sell out though.
Yeah.
They were always that. That's what there's the point. That like I think there's this version of like, they sold out, just like when you said, to secondarily answer the other question of the idea that, like, do you think that people do it because they're malicious or what? I don't, you know, dude, these ideas are as broad as the people. Like there's no pinpointing. For some people, it's, they do it because they're shitheads. Some people do it for drama. Some people do it because they're mentally ill. I don't know. In other words, all I know is I'm big for pointing that shit. I'm not really big on the idea of saying like why one does what they do because I don't know. I don't know. And even if somebody told you, I don't even know if I could ever believe what somebody says about what they do. But and I don't think that that's really relevant because it's really just tracking how like the act. It's easier to point at an action than to debate an emotion or a philosophy.
Well, I mean, I think that that's a good way to understand the other person, and you know, as I said before, I don't believe anybody is like a monster, you know. But
Oh,
you know,
sorry, sorry. There are many monsters in the world, and in this scene as well as every other one, there are monsters. There are people who have very little ideas of positive engagement for others.
well,
There, now that does.
it's not exactly good and evil. You know, there's
Oh,
not
no, 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 no,
black and
no,
white.
no.
There's gray. You know,
No, no, brother. Just to be clear, I grew up a black person in an all white, mostly area. So I'm really clear on the idea of that. Like the person who said, "I don't want you playing with that nigger," would still jump and run into a burning house for somebody they cared about. I get that.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that. That so I never I always, like, as a black person in America, I always had, and as a conscious black person in America, I always had to have a kind of uh measured understanding of the world that you can't just slap these kind of titles on people.
So I want to get to this before our hour ends, but you know, we talked about abstinence, right? I want to get has nothing to do with your project, but
Thank you.
I want which I love, by the way, and we've played together, we've performed together. Um, I want to get to my favorite topic, and it's sex, and sex is used as a tool for art. It's
Mm-hmm.
used, you know, for transgression. It's used for be, our subversive culture, right? Uh, it's also used as, you know, a pleasure tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe everyone has the right, and everyone should, you know, have a healthy relationship with that and be open about that. You know, however, I think we all have to understand that we go to these clubs, and it's, as you said, it's a broad spectrum of people. So our comfortability with that is not the same as everyone else's. So I think, and I've gone to some parties in New York. I've obviously, and I've gone to some parties here in LA, and I haven't gotten. I actually, like, I didn't get into the one big sex club in Berlin. I didn't get to go in
Mm-hmm.
there, but that's a whole different
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's, you know, it's just something where, yeah, and again, it's empathizing with people because they don't share your common pleasure. a lot of people don't understand, that things that we might say, we might be open about, hurts others,
Yeah.
and I believe in being sex positive. I don't believe in shaming. I believe do what you want as long as you're not hurting someone else. But us, having events, if one of our patrons came up to us and said, this person keeps talking to me and they keep telling me about like sex and all this these things that I don't feel comfortable with. I think it's our obligation to go to the other person, talk to them, what's going on, like if you don't stop, we need you out of the club. We can't have that
Sure.
here,
Oh,
because
100%.
people need, sex means a lot of things for people. It means great things, but it also means pain, so I think it's important for us to just realize that not everybody shares that interest, and it's hard for me to remember sometimes, because I grew up Catholic. I grew up thinking in a household where my parents didn't talk to each other for years because it was not the right thing to get a divorce. And I went to a Catholic school, no masturbation, no sex until marriage, all that shit, right? But everybody was doing the craziest shit that they were. They were doing under, in closed doors, like under wraps, right? So for
Sure.
me, I'm 42 years old, and in my last 4 years, I think the last 4 years, I've come into this world where I understand my sexuality, and I'm just happy to express it. But I talk with certain people, and it's interesting when you have conversations with people, you got to listen. A lot of people talk and talk and talk and don't listen, so I think, as I said before, okay, you don't agree with me that I guess I don't think we understood each other. I don't think everyone is pure evil. I think people make
Oh, yeah.
mistakes, and I would rather, instead of go on Facebook and say, the next day after a club that I did, hey, I ran into this person and they couldn't stop like sharing this awful information that I'm never going to this club again. I think it's better to open our ears and eyes and talk with those people and say, I understand you shouldn't come to my club and feel uncomfortable. I'm going to talk with the other person. If they don't stop, they're not going to be able to come here ever again. And I don't care about losing their business, because I don't want to have a party where people are uncomfortable, and I think it's important to be sex positive, but also understand that there's a whole other bunch of people that just aren't into that, and respect
Yeah.
the boundaries. That's I guess my whole point of that.
Yeah,
you know
and I would agree with that. All I'm saying is the idea that like I would back up and go, why is it in such a sex positive environment that we have basically the same visual aspects of metal?
Well,
You know what I mean? Like everything is so obviously from a male gaze, even the stuff that's produced, a lot of the stuff that's produced by women, it still seems like it's sitting in a male gaze to me.
I
Like,
well,
and like when outside of things that are aimed at the gay community, the male gay community, when do you mostly see like most flyers have sexy women on them?
I mean,
Not like,
talk to
like,
Chris. So
no, but in other
I
words, but this
challenge
is
you. You're closer to Chris than I am. Talk to Chris. Have Chris have a male model on one of his flyers that is barely wearing clothes or just in some provocative. I would love to see that. Or someone that
but in other words,
doesn't have a gender.
but my point is the idea that like I would agree with that. And I've talked to him about it, but I would also just call out the entire scene. I remember I've seen all like, I saw the merging of the fetish community and industrial. Because in the beginning, I remind people go back just so that way you do your own evidence, you can do your own research. Go back and look at Skinny Puppy Ain't It Dead Yet, and look at the people in the audience. You won't see the fashion demands that came after that. You won't. You see people, there's people in the audience that look like hippies. There's people in the audience. Like it just looks like a broad spectrum of people. It's not like everybody's not in black and in what would be considered industrial regalia.
Yeah, sex
So
certainly became a style
so
and a look, And but
Well, it wasn't only just a style and a look, bro. It was the idea, was the difference between whether people got into a fucking club. So that, like, that was, and that's when, that's also when we were packing mega clubs in New York City, which we don't anymore unless there's like some kind of celebrity factor. No industrial night that I know of in New York can get more than a couple of hundred people without bringing in a band. And we used to have nights where like it was only 3 DJs and you have like 600-700 people show up weekly, and so in multiple clubs all around the city. And and most, I'm sure, people around the planet and certainly around this country can attest to those kind of things. Like, they remember the heyday in their scene.
well, how much of
So,
that I mean, that doesn't sound like a great basis for a nightlife, a thriving nightlife. I mean, how much of that
well,
do you think is exclusiveness, like of not including a lot of people that, because I remember in New York to play downtime, you could play downtime because it was like before Batcave, and you're just guaranteed like a shitty slot that like maybe 5 of your friends are going to go to, and then everybody comes out after the club, right? But to get on a bill where you're playing Batcave, I mean, how many non like really popular touring bands got to be on those bills? And I was privileged because I knew people there to play one of those events, but how many people were, able to get access to that at the
well,
time?
I think that was, these are the problems of choke points, right? The idea that, like, as soon as somebody becomes the big cheese, then they get to decide. So I like, then that was like, remember when downtime really took off, that was seen from a performer point of view, that was seen as, or often used as a way to, if you do good at Batcave, you could play the Limelight. So don't forget the connections between who was producing what, and so on and so forth.
It was like a testing ground of saying, hey,
So it became a testing ground. It wasn't just the idea of, okay, things are going on here. Now, in the beginning it was, and then I like, from what I saw as an artist, I saw things go off the rails, and then people started complaining to me because I knew all the active players, and they were like, well, I've always been the person that people have come to say, like, dude, why don't you say something about this shit? You know what I mean? And like, and so I've had talks with everybody in the, like, everybody that's connected to that part of the industry as far as New York is concerned. I certainly have had conversations with. Now, the the uncomfortable sensitivities, man, you're that's also it's a huge question mark, because on some, I mean, there's people who've complained that, there wasn't enough, there was too much noise or too much. I think that's why I used the term respect before instead of safe space. It's like, because respectful space, to me, whenever I'm in respectful space, I feel safe. I don't, like,
well,
now
it's
I
hard to
don't.
determine what respect is for some people,
Well, no, in other words, no different than the idea that is to define safety for people. Because, like, what's safe for me might not be safe for you, or what's safe for you might not be safe for me. What's safe for both of us might not be safe for somebody else. So that's what I'm saying, the idea of safety versus the idea of unrespectful to people. Then if you're respectful to people, then it's less of dogma that, like, you're trying to respond to one thing or another. I can put it in an easy frame. My business partner, one of my business partners, Wolfgang Bush, is a legendary gay activist. And so, and he was around for the whole, how, like, he was the one who brought me into the ball community, and we filmed everybody in the ball community, like all the legends of the ball community as they were dying of AIDS and such. And now, decades later, um, he was having issues with the trans community because the trans community was then calling out the gay community for things and saying like, well, you have to respect us as well. And now that, which is completely true, but then it was creating this circular firing squad. Another sister who is a legendary female activist who I work with, she was talking about how a group of them were working together, and then because of a misunderstanding, they broke up as a collective. So in all these situations, it's the idea of like, my issue is the idea of, in these situations, not to create a circular firing squad. That's why I said like, and that's why also when you had said manifesto, I said code of ethics, because to me, manifesto sounds like do what we say. Code of ethics is like, dude, can't we just do a little bit better? And this is how, you know what I mean?
So
So that,
one is I guess more passive, and the other one is more.
no,
Uh,
not passive. In other words, I'm very clear in the language that I used. It was just the idea of delivery. It basically, it's the idea like, if I tell you do what we say or else,
mm.
versus like, why can't we just do better? And this is how specifically.
And
So
I think
both of them.
the beauty of that is that's what you developed, and it's great. And I think what it does well for us here doesn't necessarily. It's not the same thing for you or somebody else in another city.
100%.
And
Everybody has to tailor theirs to their environment, which was what we talked about to start with, is that everything is going to be different. It's kind of like, as an activist, the number one thing that I do when, like, working on actions and such, is the idea of asking like protest actions and saying like, okay, well, so people are going to boycott Walmart. That was one of the things that came up way back when. And I said, well, we have to be flexible about that, because if we're doing a nationwide protest, somebody might only have a Walmart in their area within miles of going anywhere. So they can't as easily avoid Walmart as like somebody like us can, who has a billion options in an urban center. So you have to be respectful of people for a lot of different reasons. And that's why I use, like, for me, because I work in so many different communities, the word respect seems to be clear and understandable to everybody. You see what I'm saying? Like, so each one fits into a clear idea of like, I might not know your issues, but I care about your issues, and you can't work in a lot of different communities without also understanding that you're walking into a community, and you don't just come in as even when I'm brought in as the expert, I don't come in as one.
and it's important to be evolving, and what you're bringing to the table is possibly what I may change in the beginning that fits my with LA Industrial, right? The collective that I'm trying to start, and also for other people. So really quick,
Mm-hmm.
this is Darryl Hell, and your project is Abstinence, and somebody in the chat is asking for more information. Where can they access your projects and information?
Well, if it's interesting because probably the best place to engage what we're doing really would be our Bandcamp page. Would probably be the best place for music, since we're talking music. So Furnace Records at Bandcamp.
And we have this awesome event planned. It's 24 hours plus. I say this because the last end of it is going to be a simulcast from the Lash for our pre-Cold Waves party, which I will say I'm glad that Cold Waves was able to have us do a pre-party. I know safety is important for you. Cold Waves is one of the only large parties that they're checking Vax cards, and they're checking or negative tests, and I'm going to say it right now. I really want to go to Das Bunker, and I want to support. And I know more than a handful of people. I know some people that bought tickets that aren't going to go. I really want to support this night, but they are not checking vaccination cards or negative tests, which to me indicates they will allow unvaxxed people to be in the same sweaty space with a lot of people with me, and I don't feel comfortable with that. And I've seen the excuses that, well, you can fake a vax card, right? And I see parallels in what we're doing, because if we don't have some kind of ground rule or anything that's like visual or something that's bare minimum, we could always make the argument, well, we have a good scene, and everyone in our scene for the most part is respectful of each other and doesn't have any kind of harassment issues, so we don't have to do this, so which is pretty much on hand with why I think I like I said, I want to support Das Bunker. But this event on Friday, the 1st, they're not doing the same. They're not having the same measures as Bar Sinister, which is another popular club here, or Cold Waves. And I will go to both of those, and I won't go to the Bunker event, which I want to. What's ironic is that we in California will have a mandate on the 7th, October 7th, and the anniversary is the 1st. So in a matter of days, it's impossible to take these measures. I played a sold out festival in Germany, Forms of Hands, and they took precautions. I went to an event at the same venue as Das Bunker, and they took precautions. I just don't see, and I would love to work. I would love to help John in any way that I can to make that happen. But I have not seen, I have just seen that they have an HVAC system that will help prevent COVID. And they're doing the minimum of what a club should have according to the state. Well, I mean, okay, so everyone's free to say or do whatever, or say whatever they want. There's freedom of speech. But if you're at a club and someone is spewing hate speech, as a promoter, it's your responsibility to go to that person and get them out if they're harassing other people.
Right.
So that's the bare minimum, is like, okay, people have rights. The state mandated before October 7th that you don't need to check the vax cards. But this is something that a lot of patrons will feel comfortable if that happens.
Well, and here's the problem with all that, though. The idea is that, like, I'm doing a project with a respiratory therapist who has turned off the machine on over 600-700 people, and had to pull all the piping out of their dead body. And she, we're launching next week, the day before our event, actually. And so point being is the idea that, look, at no point did anybody say, I know the marketing for getting vaccinated was get vaccinated, go back to normal. We're not there. There's no vaccine that's 100%, not one. So they're calling them breakthrough infections. They're not breakthrough infections. At no point did anybody tell you, like, the efficacy is like 94%.
And we're taking a risk.
Better than 100.
We're all taking a risk by going out to these nights.
But what I'm saying is the idea that, like, just so to give people better frame, instead of like, here's the parlor tricks that have been used to get people to get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, but my point is the idea that if we pay attention to how the virus finds a new host. So we have the capitalism put in the exemption that if I'm standing at the bar, I don't need my mask on.
You're drinking.
How can I drink? Now that's going to be the massive point of now you got people with moisturizing their throat for more aerosol.
Yeah.
and they're talking real loud because you're still in a fucking club.
I'm guilty of that as well. I've taken risks. I've gone to another country. Right now we're still in a pandemic, and we all take our risks, right? I just think there should be some bare minimum,
Oh, I
you know.
agree. I agree with
Mhm.
you. But in other words, I'm just saying the idea that even the things that are in place, if they did all the things, I like that was why when somebody had put up a roll call for cold waves, and I'm like, yo, I'm sitting this one out. I can't do this. Like I can't go inside a club and be dancing. I see tons of pictures of people hugging in clubs and such. I'm like, that's not where we're at. And like, I'm 57 years old. I'm dying age for COVID. And I teach in the South Bronx, which was the epicenter of when New York was the epicenter. And New York, the Bronx, the South Bronx still has some of the highest COVID rates, not like you're seeing in the Bible Belt, but they still have a high rate as a comparison to the rest of the city for sure. So I'm just telling anybody, no matter where you are, think about the idea of where you're at, and not just the idea like, well, what they legally say is blank. Just do your homework and understand how transmission happens. How does COVID find another host? That's the only interest, not whether somebody says it's good because, like, they need the money. Because that's why I said capitalism stepped in, because capitalism said, like, gave the exemption,
Yeah.
just like capitalism said, like, oh my God, you can't have open breasts in a place, but
Mm.
if you stick pasties on them, then cover the nipple and now you're fine. It's the same bullshit rules,
Yeah, money
so,
motivates everything in
right. Well, money motivates most things.
mm.
Hmm? So that's hence why we're doing this. We're not here, like, doing this code of ethics thing is not, or however we want to word this, doing this project to help the community, kind of aid, push, cajole, whatever, the community forward, is not something that's revenue generating.
Well, I just want to remind
So
everyone that our event, the 29th, the 24-hour event on Twitch, which you can even just go on squarewave.com and see it, Squarewave without the E at the end. We're raising money for the ACLU. And
right.
I've been doing that for a few years now. I actually got the idea. I mean, it's me, Jeff, and Walter that do Distorted Disco from the start. We've been doing it, and
Dig it.
we decide on like how we do the charities. And back then we had a very few amount of charities. We do a local charity here, Downtown Women's Center. We did an AIDS walk, but the ACLU, I feel like we're past the $5,000 mark. We want to get to $10,000, but it's
Mm,
really important that, especially now with the bullshit going on in Texas, like there is a tool for people to use the ACLU to go into the courtrooms, because the protesting is very important. However, the fight in the courtroom is a very important part, and the ACLU is
100%.
an organization that helps do that. I mean, a lot of people in other countries don't realize that we have this tool, and I'm happy that we're able to raise some money, and it's going to be all the cheer and points and subscriptions this month. Leading up to that day, it's all going to go to the ACLU. So I hope we could get to
Mm-hmm.
10,000. But we have a really awesome event planned. A lot of streamers that have been on the channel, and some new streamers, as well as your event. Can you just give us? We're way over a time because I got to go to work soon. But give us a few minutes about your part of the event, which is right before ours. You're on the East Coast, so it's cool. Like we're racing to the sunset here. You know.
Well, there's going to be three components to what we're doing here. We're doing it as an old, like, kind of house party type vibe. So, Hell Lab is on the fourth floor of our brownstone, and then we have a beautiful backyard that's wonderful for events and so on and so forth. So, where people will be seeing the performance is down there, and then the performer will be up here. And so the dope thing about that is that then create, like, enables the performers to go off without the idea of having, that kind of issue of, and still, in other words, still adhering to COVID regs. And then So it's going to be Derek Rush is the or Compactor is the headliner, if you will.
Very talented dude.
Um, yeah, I love his work. And then so we're doing a spotlight with Cat Hall and her release Come to Mama, which was something that was really both her to me, both her and this release were really overlooked. And so Furnace is then supporting that. And so to give like spotlight to, she was specifically talking about like with this whole code of ethics thing, the idea that she was having a problem because now she's an older woman and she doesn't look like she did when she took that hot picture years ago. And she was just like, well, promoters would like, oh, come on, you don't have that look anymore, so on and so forth. And it's just like, so I felt like, well, we can at least give a dope spotlight to some dope music. And then I'll be doing a turntablist piece that then but all but focused on 100% industrial. Because normally when I do my sets, they are kind of all over the kind of aggressive music spectrum. So it could be hard jungle or industrial bass, but noise or whatever. This one will be solid roots industrial.
Nice. I am so looking forward to that, and all the artists and our portion at the Lash, which will have some new DJs. And we have the Lash is Vax required and or negative test. And I'm happy that we have that venue. We're able to do that. And as we said before, it's not 100% safe. Everyone takes risks, so that's why we're doing the broadcast. If you don't feel comfortable coming to the event, you could watch it online. And I hope more events do that. And it's really cool talking with you, Darryl. We
Right
talk to each
on.
other, all the time. We call each other, and every conversation, I feel like we could talk for hours. Um,
100%.
and I just want to make solid our commitment, and just we need, again, we're committed to this, which means we also need to listen to everyone around us and take it in, and thank you for being helping with this, and
Right
I
on.
so
Yeah,
looking
my
forward to
great
it.
pleasure. And it's, this is my life's work. So, it fits in perfectly with how I want to see the world.
Cool. So Wednesday the 29th at squarewave.com. And you could find that on Facebook. It's going to be on Instagram, all the information
Mm-hmm.
on that. Or you just go to the Squarewave website. And yeah, thank you. I hope stay safe, and I'll see you then.
Stay hard, stay real, stay involved. Peace.